Are you fascinated by true crime stories that hit close to home? Then you need to check out the gripping new book, Allegedly, True Crime from Pontotoc County, Oklahoma. Journalist and victim advocate Raven Rollins dives into the shocking and sometimes unbelievable true crime cases that have unfolded in Pontotoc County, Oklahoma over the years. From vigilante justice in the Wild West to headline-grabbing trials of the last few decades, Allegedly uncovers the dark secrets lurking beneath the surface of the community. With over a dozen cases, there's something for every true crime aficionado. These aren't just stories, these are our stories. Learn the chilling details, the twists you won't see coming, and the lasting impact these crimes had on our neighbors. Marnie Ving, a thriller author, said, "Allegedly is amazing, so professional, so well-researched, so well-written. I'm seriously blown away." Don't miss your chance to read Allegedly, True Crime from Pontotoc County, Oklahoma. Available now on Kindle and Kindle Unlimited, and in paperback and traditional hardback at your favorite online store like Amazon, Books A Million, and Barnes & Noble. You can also click the link in the show notes to find a retailer or go to www.ravenrollins.com. Get your copy today.
You're listening to Sirens, a true crime podcast, brought to you by the Sirens Network. This podcast contains explicit content, so listener discretion is advised. The opinions expressed on this podcast are solely the views of the hosts and do not reflect the views of affiliates, associates, or sponsors of this podcast. This is Sirens, a true crime podcast.
So we're going to tell you about the Sirloin Stockade murders. And I figured that we would start with the precursor event that happened, I wanted to say it was like 3.5 weeks before the Sirloin Stockade murders. And this was, by the way, June 22nd, 1978. So let's talk about the Lorenz family. Melvin Lorenz and his wife Linda and their 12-year-old son Richard had left their home in Texas, June 22nd, 1978, to attend the funeral of Melvin Lorenz's mother. So both Melvin and Linda were sergeants in the Air Force. They were stationed at San Antonio at one point, and they were driving a pickup, and the kid, Richard, was in a camper. They were traveling north on I-35. They passed the Purcell exits. Melvin and Linda saw a car, apparently disabled, on the side of the road. The hood was up, and there was a woman sitting in the car. From what I understand, they couldn't see anyone else in or around the car, and so they thought it was just a woman who needed help. So the woman was Verna Stafford. Verna's husband, Roger Dale Stafford, her brother-in-law, Roger's brother, Harold Stafford, were actually hiding out of sight, waiting to ambush the first Good Samaritan fooled by this ruse. So Melvin pulled over and stopped, and he was ready to offer assistance, but as he walked to the car, Roger Stafford came out of hiding and met him with a gun and demanded money. So Melvin refused to hand over his wallet. Apparently that enraged Roger, and Verna would later testify against him that he pulled the trigger and shot Melvin directly in the face. So witnessing the attack on Melvin spurred Linda to action, which was Melvin's wife, and she ran toward the car screaming. She tried to hit Verna, and Verna said, "I caught her on the side of her face and she lost her balance, and then Roger shot her." Roger had actually shot Linda twice. I believe once in the stomach and once in the chest. The kid was still in the back of the truck, and he was concealed by a canopy. He started calling for his mother. When the couple were down, the Staffords actually heard what Verna would later describe as a little voice coming from the camper. So apparently, Roger was determined to leave no witnesses, and he used a knife to cut a hole in a screen on the camper, and then he just he stuck his hand in there with the gun and just randomly fired. And apparently he did, in fact, hit the son. So there was a detective on the case. He said that the amount of blood found in the back of the truck indicates that the kid was actually still alive after the first shot. It was kind of evident that he had actually got out of the back. And once he was removed from the truck, he was then shot again. So they shot this kid twice. Then They took all 3 of the bodies and dumped them. So his body was found about a mile away from the bodies of his parents, and they were all found in fields. So they stole the truck and they traveled to Stillwater, Oklahoma in the truck, and they were headed from Oklahoma City. When they got to Stillwater, there was a man that was able to identify and provide information for sketches. So he actually helped the police put together sketches of these 3 people who were seen driving this truck, which was by that time known to be stolen. So the Staffords returned to Oklahoma City and they dumped the truck at a motel near Will Rogers World Airport. So later at trial, Verna testified that it was her idea to lure unsuspecting motorists and rob them. She and Roger needed cash to pay for housing for themselves and their 3 kids. And then Harold wanted money because apparently his girlfriend was pregnant and he wanted to be able to afford her an abortion. Obviously, the Staffords didn't spend long under the radar. So July 17th, 1978, 3.5 weeks later, on the highway going southwest from Tulsa, a cream green color, 3 passengers going southwest from Tulsa. They were lined up shoulder to shoulder in the front seat. Roger was driving. His brother was on the other end in the passenger seat, and Roger's wife, Verna, was in the middle. They were heading to Oklahoma City. Actually, Roger was enjoying a nice cup of rum. Verna was sipping on rum and Coke, and Harold was drinking beers to pass the time. Nothing like good old drinking and driving.
It's the 70s, man.
So the 3 were in their early 20s. They were driving halfway across the state of Oklahoma in search of a way to get out of their desperate financial troubles, because apparently murdering the 3 people beforehand did not yield them much money. The solution to escaping a life of poverty and a way to get back on the road and out of Oklahoma was a simple one. Let's hold up a freaking restaurant. They have money, right? Each of the 3 people had a pistol they were going to use in order to intimidate victims, if need be, to take care of any loose ends that might come about in the process. They're basically already ready to murder people. The trio arrived in Oklahoma City between 6 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. on July 16th, 1978. They stopped at a convenience store to get, obviously, more Coke and beer and cigarettes before driving to a secluded park to prepare for their mission. After parking and refreshing their drinks, the pistols were passed out. So Roger took a Colt .357 Magnum. Harold grabbed a Taurus .38 caliber revolver, which was stolen from a pawn shop in Purcell, by the way. And Verna equipped herself with an automatic .22 caliber Luger pistol that was also stolen from Purcell from a completely different place. It was stolen from a family, I believe. Ammunition was distributed, and the 3 loaded back into the station wagon to resume their journey south. Later in the courtroom testimony, Verna would recall pulling into a restaurant parking lot that had a fake brown cow put up in front of it next to a sign. So Verna was describing the Sirloin Stockade, Southwest 74th Street and Pennsylvania Avenue. Oh, and by the way, I wanted to let you know, this Sirloin Stockade that they pulled up to, I actually worked across the street from it at one point and had no idea. It's in Oklahoma City, right off of Highway 62 and West I-240 Service Road. Well, when I worked across from it, it was actually a Joe's Crab Shack. And I've been in there like many, many times. I can actually remember one specific time I picked my husband up from the airport and we ate there. And I never knew any of that happened there. Well, now Joe's Crab Shack is closed down. So, I mean, it's just kind of sitting there now. But anyway, they parked the station wagon away from the restaurant and watched the last of the patrons walk out of the building. They're basically waiting for the restaurant to close so that they could go in and hold up the workers. And they waited until the manager walked over and locked the doors. "Let's go," Roger said as he drove the station wagon behind the dumpsters. They were trying to get in the back door. So Roger and Harold had their guns drawn, and Verna carried her weapon in her waistband. They advanced on the back door, where Roger knocked on it. And after a minute, a timid, middle-aged Hispanic man came to the door. His name was Louis Zacarias. He told them that they were closed, actually told them to go home. He didn't open the door, but he told them that through the door. Roger tapped on the window and showed him his gun. And so out of fear, he went ahead and unlocked the door and let them in. They told him to take him to the cash register and bring all the employees and basically gather all the employees up and so that no one could run away. The registers were opened by hand, but they had actually already been emptied out. Roger was really mad about this. He asked where the money was, and Zacarias told him, he said sometimes restaurants will take cash into a safe after closing. They kept it there until they deposit it into the bank. Roger said, okay, well then take us to the back office. And so Lewis led Roger into the back office. He told him to stay with the employees, and Verna and Harold kept watch after the 5 staff members, ensuring that they wouldn't, they told them, if you stay here, you won't get hurt. Stay with us and everything will be fine. And so they followed along. Verna heard a loud crash and some shouting from the office, and then saw Roger and Lewis come out. Roger was carrying a money bag, and he handed it to Verna. So apparently they hadn't actually deposited it yet. So Louis Zacarias started taunting Roger. This is according to Verna's testimony later, that this manager was apparently taunting Roger, saying, how could you take money from working people? I can't believe people like you taking money that's not yours and spending it without a thought, and just going on and on and on about it. And he continued, and Roger started pushing the 6 workers into the walk-in freezer. Lewis says, you're not going to get away with this. And he's yelling at him and stuff. And he's saying, I'm so sick of you guys. And Roger just couldn't take it anymore. So he told everybody in the freezer to get on the ground, told them not to talk, and that if they stayed there, no one would get hurt. His face apparently became red, and he brandished the pistol in the manager's face. Harold kind of turns to Roger and he's like, hey, what are you putting that in his face for? You said nobody was going to get hurt. We can just shut the door now and leave and everything's fine. And apparently Roger snapped and said that they're going to get what they deserve, called Harold a chicken shit and then a coward, and told him that he needed to start shooting people. So Harold turned around and raised his gun into the freezer. Roger started pulling the trigger. He first shot the 56-year-old janitor, Isaac Freeman, who fell to the floor. Roger pulled the trigger again and killed the 43-year-old assistant manager, Lewis. Harold fired several bursts into the freezer. Roger and Harold stepped into the freezer and then just started shooting randomly, round after round after round. There was 16-year-old David Salsman, 17-year-old Anthony Tu, 17-year-old David Lindsey, and 16-year-old Terri Horst. Later, they couldn't tell who shot who, because who died from whose gunshot first, because there were just bullets everywhere. And guess how much money they got out of it? $1,290. So the first police officer on the scene was Sergeant Lanny Mitchell. He says, I opened the freezer door and all I could see was blood and brains. It was totally incomprehensible. One of the victims in the restaurant still had his hands crossed. Carlos Joy, who found the bodies, including that of his girlfriend, Terri M. Horst, testified in 1979 that when he saw her body on the floor of the walk-in freezer, he thought he heard her make a mumbling noise. He said, I thought she was trying to say my name, but I don't know if she said anything. Terry's boyfriend, Carlos Joy, he was actually outside in his car waiting for her to get off work the entire time. He said at one point he could see some strange things happening inside the restaurant, and he would put his car in drive and kind of drive around the restaurant to see if there was anything going on. At one point, I think he went inside and was calling for Terry because he was starting to get worried that something was weird in there. And apparently at the time he went inside, everyone was actually in the walk-in freezer at that time. Everyone, including the murderers. And he was just well, I guess I'll go around back and see what's going on. And so he left and went back outside. And it was just timing. Every time he would go around back, someone would move to the front, or every time he never saw their car. It was just like really strange. Okay, so there were 5 victims that were dead. The 6th victim, Terri, which was his girlfriend, actually did not die. She was the only one that didn't die immediately. She was taken to Oklahoma Children's Memorial Hospital with gunshot wounds to the head and the chest. Obviously, she died before doctors could get her to an operating room. Ugh. This is the most horrendous crime in the Oklahoma City area since I've been a police officer, Chief Tom Heggie said of the slayings. I've talked to officers who have been on the force for 20, 25 years, and it's the worst they've seen. It was a shock to walk into the cooler. We can venture to say that there was probably some planning that went into the crime. And obviously, although robbery was the initial intent, there seemed to be nothing that stopped the suspects from killing. That was a clip from the New York Times. So, and it was. Apparently, this was one of the most horrendous crimes in the Oklahoma City area until the Oklahoma City bombings. Members of the slain employees' family and their friends comforted one another, and they stood apart from the 200 curiosity seekers who gathered in the parking lot.
It's like very few people are gifted the ability to cope with that kind of trauma. I don't know why you would want to go and look at that in the first place.
Steve Gattenby, who was a 16-year-old high school student, he recalled visiting one of his friends who worked at the restaurant like shortly before the murders happened, like right before they happened. He went up there to visit a friend and had actually just left. He said there were about 3 other people who worked there cleaning up the front, and there were several customers sitting around finishing their eating. It just looked like a regular night. Everybody was tired and getting ready to go home. I guess if I had stayed in there a couple of minutes longer, the police would be carrying me out with the rest of them. So a police spokesman, Sergeant Tom Mundy, said, "We have sent in fresh teams of investigators, and they are going over everything again to make sure no evidence was missed. An initial search turned up a handful of coins that investigators believe the robbers may have dropped as they fled through a rear door." Now, I never heard anything about the coins again while I was doing my research, so I guess that didn't really come into play during the trial or anything. I don't know. Sergeant Mundy said that the lab tests determined that 2 pistols were used in the slayings and that at least 9 shots were fired in the cooler. Because 2 guns were used and so many shots were fired, the authorities said that they believed at least 2 people took part in the killings. The crazy part is, so Verna had a .22. They actually didn't find any .22 bullets. It was just bullets that they found from the 2 men. I think it's safe to say that if she had a role in shooting anyone in there, she didn't use the gun that she brought. More than 100 city police officers participated in the initial investigation, assisted by the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, the Oklahoma Highway Patrol, and the Oklahoma County Sheriff's Office, Sergeant Mundy said. For months, authorities were hindered in their search for the killers. On January 3rd, 1979, police took a call from a man who identified Verna and Harold as the killers. Who was the caller, you may ask? Well, it was Roger Dale Stafford himself. And apparently he was drunk. So investigators had previously released the composite drawing to the public from the family murder case, right? From the Lorenzes. And this is what he was calling about. So apparently he saw the composite drawings and called to tattle on his own wife and his own brother, but there was still a composite sketch of him. And they're like, okay, well, who's this 3rd guy? And he's like, man, I could not tell you. I think any good detective would be like, all right, I think we know who that is. So after the sketches were released, he anonymously called officials saying that he was a truck driver who partied with Verna and Harold at a Tulsa motel and then identified them. And this would be the lead that helped investigators crack the case, adding that they had no names until Stafford provided them.
But it's like there's no telling what happened to make that happen. But I don't understand how he thought where in there did you think that they weren't going to turn on you?
A week after the Sirloin Stockade massacre, investigators found out that Harold had been killed in a motorcycle accident. So in that, knowing that your brother is dead, maybe that is a good reason to blame it on him because he could take the fall for it all.
Yeah.
When Harold was killed in the motorcycle accident, he was killed near Tulsa, and it was 6 days after the Sirloin Stockade murders. A woman showed up at the Tulsa funeral home and identified herself as his wife. Now remember, he only had a girlfriend, and now all of a sudden he has a wife.
Oh, wait. Harold, you dirty dog.
And apparently his wife, when she showed up here, she couldn't provide identification. So she came back later and she said that she was just a friend. Investigators actually tracked this woman back to an Arkansas mental institution. I'm going to let that sink in.
A what?
Okay, so when they tracked her back, she was actually able to provide more information, indicating that the Staffords were involved in the steakhouse murders. How she knew that, I have no idea. But somehow she had this information on them. So they found Harold's actual wife in Chicago, where she was working in an office with Verna, who was Roger's wife. Verna was then almost immediately arrested and promptly implicated Roger.
You think?
Verna was taken to Oklahoma. They extradited her, where she mapped out the murders. I don't know, and it was the 70s, so we'll probably never really know what role she actually played. But I'll tell you what she said here in a minute. So she let them know where Roger was. He was apprehended in Chicago as well, in a YMCA, adding that on the trip back, so the detective said that he appeared, quote unquote, nonchalant. Like he didn't even really care that he was being extradited. During questioning, he asked if his wife would be allowed to testify against him. When told that Verna was cooperating, he told officials all he could think about was the gas chamber. Following his arrest on March 13th, 1979, Roger told a cellmate that the age of his victims didn't matter to him. Quote, it didn't make any difference whether the person was 2 or 82. Andy Coates, an Oklahoma City attorney, former Oklahoma County District Attorney and past mayor, prosecuted the Sirloin Stockade case. Arthur Linville, this detective I've been talking about, headed the OSBI task force that was charged with solving the crimes in the summer of 78. He did an interview later that he said it was the most notorious crime in the state until the April 19th bombing of the federal building. He called it a joy killing, quote unquote, joy killing. He said the victims were doing exactly what they were told. He doesn't believe Verna Stafford's story about the manager's comments. Like, he doesn't think that the manager was trying to provoke Roger at all. And a key element in Stafford's conviction, they could testify against each other. Linville said that the Staffords could have gotten more from selling drugs or stealing cars, that they basically just wanted to kill people for the fun of it. Another decisive turn for the prosecutors came when Gregory Martin, 11, found the murder weapons linking the Staffords to both of the Lorenz family murders and the Sirloin Stockade massacre. Now, I don't know who Gregory Martin is because obviously he's 11 at the time. There's never too much information about
minors, yeah.
Roger Stafford ultimately received death sentences for the Sirloin Stockade murders and was also sentenced to death for the Lorenz family murders. Stafford continues to maintain his innocence, saying Verna Stafford lied on the stand. During the 1980 trial in Purcell for the Lorenz family murders, Stafford was asked why he believed Verna was trying to pin the murders on him. And he said, quote, I caught her with another gentleman and left her. She said, I'll get you for it. I'll get you no matter how long it takes. That was part of his testimony. It was later learned that Roger actually began his killings on a killing spree on January 12th, 1974. This was 4 years prior to the family murders. He killed a 21-year-old named Jimmy Earl Berry, who was a student at the University of North Alabama, working as an assistant manager at a McDonald's. Barry was shot 4 times, and the perpetrator robbed the restaurant of almost $1,400. So the crime remained unsolved until 4 years after the incident, when Stafford and his brother Harold were implicated by Verna during her confession of the Sirloin Stockade murders. He basically did the same thing in the Sirloin Stockade murders. You go in, you rob them, and then you kill them just because you can.
Yep.
And each time it's about $1,200, $1,300, $1,400. And because Roger was prosecuted and found guilty in Oklahoma, they never prosecuted him for Barry's murder because he was already serving time here. On March 13th, 1980, Verna was convicted of 2 counts of second-degree murder and sentenced to life plus 999 years. She actually divorced Roger in 1982. So, of course, she appealed her sentence in 1989. And at the hearing, then Oklahoma County District Judge Richard Freeman told her, and I quote, "I would wager that there's one of the hottest corners of hell vacant with your name right above it, and they're waiting for you," end quote. So, as you could probably tell, her appeal was denied. I was looking at the court dates and stuff like that, and what Roger was actually sentenced to. And I found that for the Stockade murders, he got 6 death sentences. But for the family murders, I found different things. There was a article on the front page of the New York Times and the Oklahoman that said that he got 3 counts of death for the Lorenz family. But then when I'm actually doing the research on it and looking through like Stafford versus State of Oklahoma and stuff like that, I never saw anywhere on any of those legit court documents where he got the death sentence for them. I did see on one of them, one of the documents said that he got 2 counts of life without parole. And of course, he appealed several times and all his appeals were denied. He was actually, so he got the death sentence and he was executed by lethal injection on July 2nd, 1995, which was like 4 months after the Oklahoma City bombing. But at one point during the trial, she said that he basically held her hostage when they were in the walk-in freezer and grabbed her and put his gun in her hand and then held his hand over her hand on the trigger and fired the trigger. Is that what happened? We don't know. The Lorenz family got justice in this case. All of the victims from the massacre got some sort of justice. I almost feel like the first victim didn't really get justice, but I understand why they didn't pursue that.
It's not even just the punishment part for him. It's the establishment of justice.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. You know, it's like, okay, so if he kills your mom and my mom, but he kills my mom in Oklahoma and your mom in Texas, and he is only serving time for your mom, it's like, hello?
Anyway, so that's the Sirloin Stockade Massacre.
The book has closed.
You've reached the end of our episode. All suspects are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Catch more next time on the Sirens Podcast.
Need a break from true crime? Then roll for initiative and check out I Crit You Not, a brand new actual play RPG podcast from the team behind Sirens.
Join host and game master Rick Rollins as he leads a cast of players through wild adventures, ridiculous monsters, and totally unscripted chaos. Whether you're a longtime tabletop fan or brand new to the world of role-playing, Rick makes it easy to follow along and even teaches the rules as you go. Expect big laughs, bigger mistakes, and character-driven storytelling where every dice roll can change everything.
If you're ready to trade cold cases for critical hits, listen to I Crit You Not wherever you get your podcasts. Even the darkest minds need a little magic.